So we are now live on YouTube with the October 7th, 2020 meeting of the Node.js modules team. We have a full, exciting agenda for you today. And I am definitely not stalling while I try to open that agenda for you all. I've got the minutes doc in front of me now. I will drop it in the chat. If anyone can help with notes, please do. It's much appreciated. The first item that we have on the agenda is number 34753, ESM experimental loader hooks. Jan, is that one that you could talk about? I know that you had an open PR you just opened around hooks and updating the interfaces.
Let me check what the actual thing in the agenda is. Is that the general? Gotcha, was really not open, right? Yeah, so I had been discussing with Jeffrey and Guy offline a little bit about how the current loader hooks work, some of the issues I personally have with the current design of loader hooks. Jeffrey had been looking at the loader hooks specifically from a chaining perspective. I had expressed my desire to simplify them. I don't think we have anything specifically connected to this issue necessarily. I'm not sure if Geoffrey wants to talk about his attempts of revamping the loaders for chaining.
Sure. So I've still like in the early stages of it. I started by looking at Gus's PR. As far as I could tell, it only implemented chaining for transform source. And I was trying to, I wanted to be able to like rewrite URLs for resolve too and things like that. So then I was looking into trying to understand how his PR worked, and also like there was a lot of discussion and back and forth on that thread of that PR of what the API should be, and I don't think it really addressed the chaining of the other hooks. So that's what I was talking to Jan about, because I was like, well, how does this relate to that other issue that I forget who it was, the intern was working on, where it was like potentially need to merge together the get source and get format hooks. Should we then merge transform source into it? So now we just really only have two hooks, like resolve and load. And then if so, should that be like, then what would the chaining look like for that? And so I think he answered all my questions there and pointing me in the right direction. So now I'm just trying to find the time to like actually sit down and write the PR, which will take some of the pieces from Gus's earlier attempt and then, add these other things. So I was speaking of archiving the modules repo, Miles, I was planning on opening an issue on the modules repo just for like discussion once I have like a clear idea of like, okay, this is what I think the API should be. I was trying to change it as little as possible, but these are the changes we have to make, I think, because of this, to just get discussion from the team and then, implement a PR. That's the plan.
Okay, cool. Would someone be able to summarize that in the notes, please? Next issue that we have up is 3346. Oh, I guess also like for what it's worth, we've had this one of the experimental module loader hooks on the agenda for a number of weeks. Is this something that we could take off the agenda until there's an update?
I think the thing you have on the agenda, but is that related to what Jan or I were just talking about, or I think it's yet another different thing?
This was the 31414. It was the one the intern was working on to remove the get format hook.
Oh yeah, I'm thinking. So yeah, assuming no one objects to the plan that I just described, then yeah, I would end up merging the hooks as part of this, like implementing chaining. I was hoping to avoid that, are as isolated as possible, like just add chaining without making unrelated changes. But Jan pointed out a bunch of problems with chaining if we don't merge these hooks. So I think it'll have to be merged together. So yeah, this will just get resolved as part of that work. I think we can take it off the agenda.
Okay, cool. Next then we have is number node issue 33460. Special treatment for package JSON resolution and exports. This one I feel like we've kind of discussed to death a little bit.
Yeah, I think this is just waiting for like, you know, I'm the one who volunteered to do it, for me to like put up a PR for a function off of module that locates the directory. So I don't think we have anything to discuss because we've sort of all agreed that some sort of API to obviate the need to require the package JSON would be ideal.
You maybe in the near term, do you want to maybe just open an issue with like, here's what I'm going to do. It's going to be this function, this API.
On the modules repo?
Yeah, or Node somewhere. And then we could like link to that from this old issue and then close this old issue, or, you know,
there's another open issue on the modules repo about it.
But I think, didn't I remove the agenda label of this? I didn't realize that it was still.
I think you removed the one from the modules repo, but not the one from Node.js.node. I just removed the one from Node. I just removed the label from.
Yeah, it's issue 516 on the modules repo. That's the one that Guy removed the agenda label from. And Jeffrey, I feel like that's the one to point to.
We did have 2 issues for the same topic before, well, similar points.
Right.
I'm just thinking there are a bunch of outsiders that are interested in this, like the package, the bundler maintainers. So if we could just put a comment on one or the other issue, or make a new issue that links to something along those lines, so that the people who are interested in this know, okay, this is the decision, you know, we'll get to it when we can, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So I think next steps there is definitely just like Jordan, maybe updating with a high level overview of what you plan to work on. I removed the label and we can iterate on it. Okay, so the next one we have here is number 553, empty path matching in patterns. Has this been fixed upstream, or is this still something that needs discussion?
I think this was something that we marked for discussion because Jordan specifically wanted us to support matching empty patterns, and I specifically don't want us to. So it's a good discussion.
Okay, so do one of you want to introduce the topic and specifically what we're talking about supporting here?
Okay. Or Jordan, do you want to start, or shall I? Okay.
No, go ahead and start. I'll hop in.
Right. So we landed patterns, and this is pretty cool. You get a nice syntax effectively for being able to, what would otherwise be a lot of repetition in exports is now like, it's amazing how much it simplifies your package JSONs in different cases. Yeah, I'm super pleased we got it in. When I landed the PR, Jordan had just mentioned, does the wildcard in the pattern, does it support empty matches? And I clarified that it doesn't. And that one of the nice features of that is that it effectively reserves sort of trailing path resolutions or trailing slash resolutions in cases where you would otherwise have a /*.
Just a really quick point of order. Can you define what you mean by an empty match, maybe by sharing some code in the chat so I can understand the context here?
Sure.
Cool.
So you would normally write, say you write a pattern like this, where you would say.
Actually, would it maybe make sense to screen share an editor for you right now so that those watching would be able to see what you're typing also?
Well, you know what? Let me just link to the PR for the patterns, and we can just use that example. I'm just loading it up here.
Well, I think I could even explain it a little simpler. I think that if you do a trailing slash on the left-hand side, like .foo/, and you map that to another directory, what that does currently is that basically fully exposes that directory. So for ESM, that means every explicit path inside that directory can be potentially imported. And for CJS, that means the entire CJS resolution algorithm applies for that entire directory. that includes if you have a like index.js in there and you try to require foo slash dots, a specifier that ends in foo slash there, you'll map to the index.js. That is different with the stars, in that if you put a star after the slash, it no longer allows you to map into the slash.
So yeah, this is where my argument was basically like that as a feature, not a bug, because of the fact that we allowed extension searching for trailing slash exports, which we've now effectively documentation deprecated, and we are thinking of effectively having a slow deprecation over a couple of majors. The thing is, if you have well, let me just bring it back to the patterns case for now. So I just posted in the pull request with exports patterns, and in that, the top of the comment, there's a basic example where there's a features mapping. Features star goes to dist features star star.js. So you're in this case, it's kind of like.
Ty, do you mind sharing your screen?
I specifically just copied the PR to exports patterns there to avoid having to share my screen. It's the first example at the top. So in this example, if you
It's right here.
Thanks. If you were to load like features / whatever you want to call your feature, magical feature, then it'll load dist features magical feature / magical feature.js. So you've got this kind of model of the folder name and the file name the same for your main entry points. If you support the empty match, that would mean that someone imports package / features / and then nothing after the /. It would then attempt to resolve dist / features / .js, which in my mind is like a nonsensical resolution. Like there is no definition where the person writing this would expect it to resolve to, for the empty match to have meaning is effectively the argument. So yeah, that's the kind of case. But I think Jordan's argument as well is that like in other usages of star on like file systems, etc., it is designed to support an empty match. So it is a difference, and maybe
one more to the point, every other usage of star in programming I'm aware of means 0 or more.
Right. I think every is a strong term, and there's
I'm aware of.
a lot of keyboards and stars on them, and a lot of programmers out there. So yeah, but yeah, so that's the gist of the argument.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I agree that an empty match in this example that guys provided would make no sense. But in that case, you'd just get a resolution error in both module systems. So I don't see that as an issue. Like you get the same. Go ahead.
Would you necessarily? Because like, I know, don't URLs like / in the middle of the URL, like, I'm not sure exactly, like don't browsers sometimes collapse that or something? Like I'm wondering if this becomes a situation where it behaves differently on different platforms.
Well, in this exact example, it would map to dist / features / .js. So that would fail to resolve unless you had a .js file with serious, like just where the full name was .js directly inside the features folder. So like, I suppose there's a chance it could work, but yeah, I mean, I think
the / would go into the module registry, and if your file that was only called .js happens to import another JS file in that same folder, you would effectively get multiple instances because the module map doesn't dedupe double /. So you're then in a sort of a double caching scenario as well.
But I think the more convincing example that Guy had was if it's actually mapping to x/index.js. So basically, you say every feature is in a subdirectory, and index.js is implementing it. In that case, you are now mapping to features/index.js, which you might not have planned to expose.
I mean, the other thing is all the cases where an empty match makes no sense are when you'd end up with 2 slashes next to each other. And all the cases where it might make sense don't have that. So it could also be fine that, I mean, could we maybe just detect when a star being replaced to nothing causes multiple slashes next to each other, an error on that anyway?
It's kind of that and the extension cases. And I think we hope that in most cases, this is, you know, I guess we expect more cases than none to include extensions. If that makes sense.
I mean, the other thing we could do is in the modules issue, Guy's example is where the left-hand side is /star and the right-hand side is /sub/star. In other words, where both patterns end in a star. Perhaps we could allow that to have an empty match only. And then that avoids all the weird cases, but, you know, brings it back to parity with the
this was our original
slash endings.
This was our original discussion. This is where I was saying to actually, it's kind of nice that in the case where you just load package with the trailing slash at the end, exports actually cannot, once we deprecate trailing slash exports cannot map it. And therefore the only meaning of resolving package with the trailing / would be resolving the package directory. And then sort of import meta.resolve could do that. And it gives us that feature in import meta.resolve at some point maybe. Which I thought was a sort of a nice outcome. And but I think what Jordan's getting at is that when it comes to loading CommonJS, and we do have the, you know, if we have the extension searching, but on that note as well, it's worth noting that patterns don't do extension searching for require. So when you're using patterns, you're also opting out of the extension searching that we added for the path exports in the CommonJS system originally.
So I want to reply just to your first point there, Guy. I don't think we should ever have a special case where like import meta resolve can handle the slash and give it the directory. That's too magical. I think that if slashes are referring to file system paths, then great, that works. But the way that the exports feature is designed, like you can no longer know based on the slashes what the directory setup is of the module. So I don't think it would make sense to reserve that for that feature. Yeah, like I don't think we'd ever want that, even if we make no changes to patterns.
Right. It's very much a side point, and certainly not something I'm hedging the main argument on.
Like I think it would be harmful, I'm saying, to use it for that. So like I think that it's not even just a side point to me. It's just, well,
specifically, I was thinking of that behavior only being defined. We'll put it this way: a trailing slash resolution would normally fail because it's not a file; it's a directory you're resolving. When you resolve a directory, it'll throw that it's not a file in the resolver. Therefore, the import.meta.resolver can potentially have some kind of special exception.
Oh yeah, I agree with you that it's technically feasible. That's exactly how it would work. But I'm saying that from a user standpoint, doing package slash being something different and magical compared to package slash foo slash, I think that would be harmful and confusing.
So I'm just going to do a really quick point of order. Do we feel like we're getting close to anything actionable here? We've spent quite a bit of time on this topic, and we have 3 more topics we want to get to before even getting to the meta topic that we wanted to discuss today. So is there a path forward here? Is there an action item to be taken? Or is it still like we don't have consensus on making changes?
I mean, I don't think we have consensus. I would say, I think that the action item might be like the one I would propose is when the left-hand side and right-hand side end in a star, we allow that to be the empty match. That doesn't create any of the weird cases that were brought up with collapse slashes.
I've joined late, but there are a couple of file systems I've found in the wild that do allow empty file names where they have a 0 length file name. In particular, if you mount S3 buckets, they allow you to have empty file names, and those can be directories. But this is complicated, and I don't know how much people care about mounting S3 buckets.
There was a Star Trek episode once that involved a virus that was in a file with no name, and I was like, that's just science fiction. This is crazy talk. You just blown my mind, Bradley.
You're living in the future, Jeffrey.
I never thought I'd see this day.
But this is just going to show it's very hard to decide what is and isn't a valid file name. So a trailing slash in S3 is meaningful because it points to the file without a name.
Kind of seems like that means we have to have it be the empty match and delegate it to the file system.
It is the only modern file system that I have found, and I have been looking hard, that supports it. I don't think it matters that much, honestly. It's a category of file system called flat file systems that have fallen out of favor for hierarchical file systems, which is what most people use. But this does get into the like URL normalization issue. That's a separate topic. So let's skip that.
Can we just punt this to the issue? Is there anything else we need to discuss as a team?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to, we can't take up more time on it now, but we haven't kind of reached a resolution, so I don't want to just shut down discussion. So I'm open to whatever form of dialogue is suitable to continue discussing this. We should probably move on to the next item.
Okay, so next up here, and if someone could please put a summary of this topic, would be very much appreciated. The next one we have is enable import meta resolve by default. Guy, has there been any movement on this?
I'm happy to skip that discussion for today.
Should it stay on the agenda or should we drop it from the agenda?
I don't know. I can go either way on that. I think maybe we should just drop it for now.
Okay.
Is this something that's like we're waiting on standards body?
Yeah, it's another one of those ones that just sort of falls into spec limbo because there's nowhere to make progress on it, so it just sits and waits.
Should we maybe have like a doc like in the modules repo or somewhere that's like, you know, waiting on standards body things, and it would be this, it would be import maps, anything else where it's like whenever some upstream body makes some decision, then finally we do something?
Well, so I mean, if you want to maybe just time box this to a few minutes, we can maybe just get into it very briefly from sort of a more meta perspective. I don't know if that fits the time we have left, Miles.
I didn't want to talk specifically about import meta resolve. I was just thinking in general to avoid having these things be on the agenda week after week. If we could like keep track of them somewhere else.
I think it would be good for us to get through like the existing agenda items and the meta topic about like the future of this group before we get too much into talking about like new process we may want to introduce. Definitely. Although maybe that is something that could come up during that meta discussion.
Let's leave it off the agenda for today then.
I removed the label, so please re-add the label if you think we need to. The next two are kind of the same, mocking use case and hot modules with ES6 modules. Like these were two requests that we had. I believe that like
we can skip both of those probably.
Could we remove the agenda label from these two?
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
I think Gil found a hacky way to do module reloads. The only missing piece now is providing a way to do module reloads that also clears the old version from the module cache so that Node doesn't gradually take up more and more memory as it runs every time you reload the thing. But that's like an isolated, like someone should just open an issue for that to deal with at some point in the future as its own like enhancement to Node. And but otherwise, there's nothing else that anyone can do, I don't think, or nothing else that anyone needs for that for now.
Yeah, and Wes says in the chat it almost. Oh, Wes, were you about to speak, or Brad was about to speak?
I was. So these are upstream problems that V8 is currently not addressing. So there's not much we can action on them.
And I think that also maybe falls nicely into that thing that we were talking about, like spec limbo too. These are like, how do we deal with problems that are like upstream issues where we don't want to, like, in some cases diverge, in other cases we don't have the infrastructure. So like those could be good meta topics. So with all of those punted,
I think there's one more item.
that was the last one.
There should be one more item for file URL normalization, which I added on the agenda. It seems a bit weird. It seems to have missed some things.
If anything was added after Monday, it won't be in there.
Wasn't this added before Monday?
It was on Monday.
Okay. Well, Bradley should probably take this one, but we do have Miles, maybe, do you want to give us a time box?
I mean, honestly, we only have 15 minutes left, so I would say use as much of that 15 minutes as you want, because the other topic that we want to get into is probably meatier than 15 minutes.
We can try under 5. Maybe Bradley can introduce it.
Oh gosh. So this kind of falls into what Jeffrey was saying. There's a horrible thing that's happening, and it's up to us to try to figure it out. So the WhatWG URL specification is altering how they resolve file URLs. In one case, it seems pretty much universally agreed upon to be a bug fix about how hosts for files, because files can have, hosts for accessing machines on your network, how that is being fixed. But it also has a secondary change where historically having multiple prefixing slashes on your path name, they would be deduplicated to a single slash. And so if you tried to have like file localhost ////A, I'll put this in the chat. That would just become file localhost /A. Now they're going to start preserving those slashes. So this actually means that in our current implementation of the URL parser, if you do a specific kind of loading where you import, particularly dynamic import in this case, and you do this plus foo, it now will have a different module identifier than it previously had. And so if you use a different method than string concatenation, such as new URL, it will point to a second different URL, which is not bueno. So it's pretty bad if that happens.
Double loading your modules in the registry because they have multiple identifiers for the same path.
Correct. So there's actually like an edge case, which I didn't know about, that a bug in Node is preventing. So when you use URL dot file URL to path, this function actually has a bug in it, or not a bug. We can argue about it. Doesn't matter. What it does is it will take any adjacent slashes in the path name, not just prefix, but also between directories, and convert them to a single slash. And so if you do some specific hokey things, you can actually use new URL to have path names generated with multiple slashes in the path name between directories. So you can have like A//B in your path name. And this utility function is actually not deferring to the operating system to do that. It's actually doing it itself, which seems like a bug.
I believe it's just
and
fast.resolve internally.
I don't think it's entirely that. I think there is some
I'm
other
pretty
stuff
sure
going on.
that's what I wrote.
Well, we can look at it and figure that out. But this only really affects
1 minute left.
Yeah, this only really affects S3 if you mount it. So I don't know. Also, if you real path, which we do by default, this won't affect you anyway. So this really affects people using preserve symlinks
Can I just
and S3.
Can I jump to
Go
like
ahead.
kind of action items on this? Is like, one, at the moment, we haven't implemented what's in the what-org spec that's just landed in the what-org spec. The option A is like implement it and then add our own renormalization on top of it. Option B is try and actually get something into the what-org spec that does better file URL normalization, because this does also affect Dino and any other server-side platforms that want unique file URLs. And also when users are using your new URL. But if we have hit the time box for this week, then we should probably just defer it to next meeting or when we can discuss this again and move on.
I don't think that we have enough time to really dig into the other topics. So I think that if you two want to talk about this, it's not unreasonable.
Well, do you want to just say that we're going to have at least one more meeting then, Miles, and then we can put it on the agenda for that meeting of the future of the group?
Yeah, I guess like, or we can just pivot right into it and maybe we can reach consensus. We have quorum really quickly. I was proposing before we kicked off this meeting that it kind of feels like this team has run its course and these meetings have kind of reached an apex of their productivity. And, you know, perhaps I am mistaken and perhaps this is my own bias. But I feel like, especially with the majority of the implementation of things we wanted to accomplish being in 14, getting backported to 12, getting closer to calling it stable. And with the last number of meetings, this one being an awesome alternative, but we really have not had quorum for quite a while in these meetings. And so, you know, I was really curious if we as a group felt like these meetings are still very productive, because to me, it feels like a lot of the momentum and a lot of the work is happening upstream. And it might be better to just kind of like focus the efforts there rather than continuing the structure that we have in place with the modules team.
I think you've kind of struck a chord with me there. I do agree that we have less topics to go through. They're more specialized now. We can do more effort upstream, but I think there are a few things that we also simply haven't done either due to this year or due to burnout. And particularly, we were very enthusiastic about things like loaders allowing people to instrument our module system, and we've not followed up with that goal in this working group. So maybe we could narrow the focus to things we haven't accomplished.
I mean, I don't have an answer to that, but I was thinking about like just how this meeting has gone, and I feel like right now there seems to be like the things that people are working on they're more working on much smaller groups, like 2 or 3 people, and there aren't as many things that require the attention of the whole models team. So like, I feel like we could maybe stop the meetings and then just people schedule ad hoc meetings, maybe even post it on the modules repo, be like, anyone interested in whatever, loaders, URLs, whatever it is, who wants to meet about this, and we just schedule ad hoc meetings around specific topics with the people who are interested in those topics, and we don't keep like trying to pull in the whole team very often, because I don't think we really have any decisions that need to be made anymore, really, on the team level, So yeah, maybe we stop the meeting and that's it. I don't know what else we would necessarily stop.
Well, I think that there's something about like kind of there was that like kind of implicit upstream moratorium around like landing things without kind of like explicit review by this group, which I think is kind of to an extent has kind of fallen to the wayside with the way in which work has happened upstream, and arguably like we've had better velocity because of that, which is also one of the things that has kind of inspired my thinking on this. I think things that we could do in different orders include, like stopping the meetings. I think one big question is having the separate repo itself still useful? We could archive the repo and have issues that are only upstream. And I guess like is the separate space improving velocity or creating friction?
I find the separate space useful. Like I like being able to open issues in the modules repo for discussion that I feel like I can't do the same on the main node repo.
I'm wondering if
that's a sorry, Guy, go ahead.
Sure. I was just wondering if it would help, because maybe the difference is that it's a change of momentum in that, the 2 weekly thing was quite necessary while we were under the time pressure of being the laggards in terms of getting modules out. And now that we've actually shipped and kind of reached a milestone, as it were, the burden of having a meeting every 2 weeks is probably unnecessary for most of us. So I'm just wondering if there's another way to still frame the agenda items that can come up from time to time, and say maybe it's like a capacity thing, like once a few things come up, then a meeting gets called, or I don't know if there's a way to something a little bit more, just in time, as it were.
What I wanted to add to what Geoffrey said about not feeling comfortable opening discussion issues on Node.js Node, I feel pretty strongly that if we have discussion issues that affect Node core, they should be on Node.js Node, because they do affect all the other contributors and all the other users as well. It's no longer a thing that is sequestered, whatever, in some corner and doesn't affect other people. If we discuss something about Node.js modules or modules in Node.js, we need to have those discussions on Node.js Node, because people there should be able to see them.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that the discussions need to happen in their entirety there, right? Like it's useful to talk some things out in smaller groups before bringing them to larger groups in general. And the modules repo is a space to do that. That's public, that anyone can follow and participate in.
I think to some degree, yes. But I think we are currently leaning too heavily on discussing things in that one corner, and then it doesn't necessarily get seen by the right kind of people, because it gets only seen by a small group that is not necessarily all representative of the Node contributor base.
I think there's also a mismatch there in where the work is happening versus where the discussion is happening. And that's a big mode shift that has happened, where like when we were early in this, kind of like all the work was happening in a fork, all the discussions, all the decisions were happening here. Then there was a discussion that needed to happen upstream when we were going to integrate. But we're kind of at a point now where the work is happening there. It's not like there are discussions that we're having here that are meta discussions about it. And I think that perhaps there is another conversation to be had about figuring out perhaps how to onboard folks from this team who have not been onboarded into the main repo yet, which is a totally other thing. But you know, looking at like where the work is happening, where the discussions are happening, we don't have ownership of the code base. Discussions, momentum, and work. You know, it's a really great example of this is the documentation. There's been a ton, an absolute ton of iteration, innovation, and work on the docs for modules that never had a single issue raised on Node.js modules. The team was like pinged in it, but a huge amount of the work was done by someone who's not even participating in this team.
Yeah, and also talking about Guy's recent work, most of the reviewers, at least half of the reviewers for Guy's recent work were not on this team. And most of the discussion was driven by people who are not necessarily on this team. I wanted to quickly bring up what Wes was writing in the chat just so it doesn't get lost. He's pointing out that there are some pretty contentious decisions, like, for example, the removal of the experimental extension searching flag that we always said we would discuss in this group and make a decision on eventually, but we never did. And so there is, I think, a fair point here about if we ramp down this group before making that decision, we are kind of pulling the rug away from people who have trusted in the process and delayed that decision so far.
And on that note, I gotta drop. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, we gotta call it, but I think with that in mind, like I think that this shouldn't be the kind of thing where we just turn off the lights right away. But if we are going to move in that direction and to that point, we really should probably enumerate the unfinished business so we could avoid ghosts and hauntings. Does anyone have any last bits to add before we close this meeting for the day? Okay, well, thank you everyone for participating. And as of right now, we'll see you in 2 weeks.